in going back again and again to her speeches, it's almost as if these conservative Republicans are treating her like a Manchurian nominee. Somebody who has been on the bench for 17 years, has this long, very moderate record, but at the end of the day, if she gets appointed to the Supreme Court, all of a sudden is going to become something very different. And Coburn is a very independent guy in some respects, but this does play into a larger scenario on the right, that there is a secret agenda, not just with this nomination, but some would say with the entire Obama administration. And it does go to this issue of, are they going to take our guns away? Are they going to allow foreign governments to come in here, and we're going to have to follow their laws? This is a very, it's a small group, but it is very volatile right now on the far right of people who have these views, and some of these lines of questioning, I think, are playing into that paranoia.
Well, let's cut it back to a middle case. Maybe they have a point, not so much that she is a foreigner or an alien force or someone who's un-American in some scary way, but that she is hooding herself, that she is keeping down under, let me go to Andrea, she's not the same person who gave that speech to the Duke University students. She's not the same person who speaks to fellow Latinas about their hopes and dreams to be a bigger part of American society. She is being a very controlled personality here in a way that is not fully illustrative of who she is. It's a fair criticism.
Also, to be fair to the Republicans, there's also a difference between being a Supreme Court justice and being an appellate court judge. And the fact is, the Supreme Court does have the power.
Oh, sure it does.
To set major new precedents.
Her conundrum is that she's the one that gave the speech that said, at the appellate level, we make policy. And for her to step back and say, oh, we're constrained by precedent, doesn't fit. What do you think it is, this xenophobia that's always out there? It's redolent out there. And I wonder, you know, it comes up when you ask people what percentage of U.S. spending goes to foreign aid, and they'll say, well, 20%. They'll give you answers like that when, in fact, it's minuscule in terms of our GDP. And this fear that the federal government is somehow going to be kowtowing to some world government, the black helicopters are on their way. Where in our history has there been any evidence that we have been in any way submerged by international law as a republic? Where is the example where this has occurred?
There isn't, but it's a great political issue for the reasons that you just stated, right? I mean, it's a great political issue and not a particularly strong legal argument, meaning as a political issue, you can try to get people to believe that somehow the courts have become sort of slaves to international proceedings. But the reality is, of course, that's not what's happening as a legal matter. And I think that this is, again, where politics and law intersect.
Thank you very much, Dan. Let's go right outside to Jeff Sessions. He's ranking Republican on this committee.
And not be reversed. Any city and state in America could deny any individual American the right to keep and bear arms, because she says the Second Amendment does not apply to the states, in her opinion. The Supreme Court in Heller didn't decide that, but they really sent a signal that this was an open question and that the older cases may not be binding. She made no reference to that. She just flatly stated it's not a fundamental right and that it does not apply to the states. So I'm troubled about that, because she may well have a vote on that issue, because the case that comes up to the court may not be hers. It could be another circuit's case. And as Senator Kyle asked her yesterday, she refused to say she would not sit on it or recuse herself.
I would say they do remain questions. For example, she indicated this morning to a question about foreign law that she agreed with Justice Scalia. Well, she, in her speech that she made, and we have a record of, she indicates that she agrees somewhat with Justice Scalia and Thomas, and pointed out one thing that she thought they made a valid point on, but then indicated her preference was the theory of Justice Ginsburg, who's the leading advocate of the citation of foreign law. And those are questions, as we deal with a judicial philosophy and what she will be like on the court, give some insight, I think, in what kind of judge she would be, because constitutionally, you see, foreign law has no binding on us in any way. and I'm sure everybody can agree on that. But some think that you can use it to influence decisions in non-absolute binding ways and cite it as authority in rendering opinions in the United States, and that's created quite a controversy. Justice Ginsburg's on one side, the American people, I think, on the other, and it's pretty clear in her speech she said she favored the Ginsburg ideas. Any questions?
Has there been anything that she said today that makes you believe that she will be introducing activism on the
Well, I think the approach to law through according to the speeches, as the senator has asked, her statements about foreign law indicate to me not a the decision on the firefighters case is a movement in that direction, I think. So, and overall, her speeches definitely indicate, as the Wall Street Journal said today, we're looking at the classical activist, in their opinion.
But let's go to Patrick Buchanan, who joins us right now. Pat, this question as to whether a Supreme Court justice of the United States should look at foreign law and reviewing cases, what does it mean to people?
Well, what it means to conservatives and traditionalists is that you're starting to move outside the sovereignty of the United States if you're looking at and influenced in any way by decisions in foreign courts which were made pursuant to legislation in which Americans were uninvolved. This sovereignty issue, Chris, has really raised its head for the last 15 or 20 years. It's very powerful among conservatives, and they say this: a judge on the Supreme Court is to judge strictly and only on the basis of American law and the Constitution of the United States. For what purpose would you consult foreign law? And how should foreign law in any way influence your decision? Therefore, why would you consult it? And I think it's a valid question when you have folks like Justice Ginsburg saying these things are all relevant to be taken into consideration.
What has been her, do you know her argument, Pat? I mean, on the other side, what is her argument as to the relevance of a French court decision, for example, on a U.S. case?
Well, I don't know exactly why she says it's valid, but I don't understand why it should be in any way valid, influential, or even brought into consideration when you have, I mean, the argument here is how should judges decide and on what basis? And even Judge Sotomayor has been saying strictly on the basis of law, on the basis of precedent, on the basis of the Constitution of the United States. And I think there's a real fear, and certainly among conservatives, and understandably so, Chris, because in a lot of, there are global institutions, take the WTO, which simply invalidate American state law, and under the WTO, they have the right to do this. And so a lot of Americans are deeply concerned about that. They're concerned about the United States going into international criminal courts where they can arrest American soldiers. And these are really burning issues among conservatives.
Right, but what about the question that the United States law involves not just our Constitution, but all the treaties agreed to by Congress?
Well, this is why the WTO and some of these other things are, they're enabled to really reach in and alter American law. Nobody denies that you can invoke a treaty which has the equal validity as the U.S. Constitution. As you know, in the Bricker Amendment battle in the 1950s, they tried to change that, and they were unable to do so.
But aren't you protected by the Connolly Reservation?
Well, the Connolly Reservation only applies, that's 1946. That only applies to the World Court, Chris. It says the United States will not abide by necessarily any decision of the World Court. It doesn't apply to the WTO.
Okay, thank you, Pat. We'll be back. I want to keep hearing from you in this because these are sentiments that I know are in the country right now. Concerns, I use the term black helicopter because that, of course, is perhaps the cartoon notion that at some point American villages will be invaded by a foreign force which will take over, basically. Pat, you know that sentiment. Do you believe it?
Red Dawn.
Okay, we'll be right back with more coverage from our across-the-board ideological look at American sentiment as we watch these hearings.